She received 3 DUI arrests, multiple years of childhood abuse, including physical, mental, and sexual abuse. She's here to talk about that and her recovery on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show.
Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Look for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on youtube.com, and be sure to subscribe. Like everything we do, it is free. Look for and subscribe to Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on YouTube, where you'll find great police videos and episodes of the podcast. Best of all, it is free.
Joining us from Florida, a neighbor actually, Delray Beach. We used to call it Delray. That's what they used to call it back in the day. Now it's a booming, going on thing. I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida. We're right next to each other. We have Marci Hopkins on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Marci was arrested 3 times for DUIs. We're going to talk briefly about that. But what drove that was childhood trauma. She was physically abused, sexually abused. We'll talk about all that and more. She's here to talk about her story, her journey, what happened. She's written multiple books. The most recent is Wake Up, You're Not Broken, and her website is wakeupwithmarci.com. That's wakeupwithmarci.com. Marci, thanks for so much for being a guest on Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
And it's I don't normally do a lot of interviews with people that have done DUIs. And here's the reason why. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of them. And there's always a big reason why. Ultimately, and I'm not making excuses, we have a decision to make ahead of time. Don't drink and drive, ever. If you got a drinking problem, just don't drive. That's it. Take an Uber. Do a Lyft. Do something. Just don't drink and drive. But that is often driven by all kinds of childhood trauma and other issues. Was that the case for you?
Yes, it was the case for me. And the first 2 DUIs I received were very early on. I was 19 and then 20.
That was like a lifetime ago for me.
I'm now 56.
Yeah, you're still a pup because I can't remember being 19. It was so long ago.
Well, I'm much older now, so that was quite a few years ago. And what happened for me is there was abuse. My mother had me very young, and there were multiple boyfriends, and she was out drinking and doing the things that young people do. But she had a child. That was the difference. And there was physical abuse that started when I was about 6 years old. Moved in with my grandparents. There was a lot of anger within that home, but I am grateful that I had those years from 6 to 12. And then at 12 years old, my mother remarried, and I thought this guy was going to be our knight in shining armor, and I was going to have that life that I always dreamed of as a child. And what happened about 6 months in is sexual abuse started, and that really changed everything for me. I lost the young girl that I was. Mm-hmm.
Well, and by the way, I'm a totally different guy now than I was 19. That's part of the reason why I am the way I am. And Marci and I talked about it. I've been sober now 35 years. But back when I was 19, I could not wait to go out for ladies' night. I could not wait to go out to the bars. It was always going to be wonderful. None of the bad stuff is ever going to happen.
Yeah. So you do think you are invincible, but I was using alcohol starting about the age of 12 to cope with what was going on. So once that sexual abuse started and such, when I graduated high school, I was out of the house. My mother was a raging alcoholic, and I couldn't wait to get away. And so I just jumped into the club scene, and that was just a time where I was like, it was 87, and I was like ready to have fun, ready to escape, and just dive deep into that world of partying, and that's where those first two DUIs happened for me.
Now,
and then the other one happened later.
In the 80s, whereabouts were you when this occurred?
Houston, Texas.
So let's just say this. I want to clarify. When I started in policing in 1980, DUI was not taken anywhere near as serious as it was around 85, 86. And things being changed drastically. We did not give people breaks. And the reason why is quite simple. It's because police got their butts sued off for doing that. Because people, you give them a break, you lock the keys in the car, or whatever it might be, you drive them home, and they go back and get the car and they kill someone in an accident. And you're like, I'm not doing that anymore. Things changed radically. But I'm not diminishing. I want to say this one more time. I'm not diminishing the impact of driving while intoxicated. I'll never, ever advocate for that. No. I'm just saying that is understandable. In Houston, Texas, and when I was, let's just say 19, a totally different cat than I am today.
Yeah, 100%. And listen, I tried to stop drinking at that time, but it was, the courts were trying to force me to get sober, and I went through AA, but I was young and it didn't stick for me. And I was comparing myself to others in the room.
No, you're so unique, aren't you?
Yeah, right. We all do it. Right. But then I was sober for like 3 months, and then I started drinking again. And then, it took me on a course till I was about 45 years old.
How long, while you're bringing that up, you got a brief taste of sobriety. It was forced. I believe, in my case, it was forced. Absolutely one of the best things that ever happened to me. It was not something I volunteered for. But I believe somewhere or another we're all forced, either by circumstances, the courts, loved ones, somebody. It is not something that most people come up with on their own, because there's major changes. But before then, what I always tell people is there's a lot of suffering, and a lot of people don't make it to get their rear end in the chair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How bad was it for you?
True. So listen, like I said, those early years, there were a lot of consequences for me. And then life started taking a better course for me. I went to the Art Institute of Houston. I started working in the media. I worked for Fox Liberty Sports Communication. I was being promoted. I was, going up the rungs. And I ultimately ended up in California. And that's where I met my husband, and I got married, and I retired from media and started a family. But during that time, I was still drinking throughout the entire time. It would elevate at times depending on what life looked like for me, or I would try to keep it under wraps at times. But with the alcoholism that I was surrounded by and the people I was surrounded by, I didn't really look at myself like I was a problem or that I had a problem.
Well, one of the things that I did
later on.
One of the things I did was I always hung around people that drank worse than me. And it's like, I'm nothing like so-and-so. I'd be glad to know like that.
Yeah. So you do surround yourself with people that are drinking like you, or then even worse than you, like you're saying. And then you compare yourself, and then you don't feel so bad about yourself. I was never as bad as my mom, so, I couldn't have been an alcoholic.
That's exactly the point. And by the way, I said this jokingly when she said she's unique. The other thing that we would get quite a bit is, but you don't seem to understand. Not only am I different, I'm angry. Oh, yeah. Like none of us else are angry. Life didn't turn out the way we wanted, that's for sure. We're talking about Marci Hopkins. She had 3 DUIs, lots of childhood trauma, which we'll talk about in a few moments. She is the author of multiple books. Most recent is Wake Up, You're Not Broken. And her website is wakeupwithmarci.com. That's wakeupwithmarci.com, MARCI.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
There's only one official Facebook page for the show. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to click like.
current conversation with Marci Hopkins on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. She's contacted from Delray Beach, Florida. She's had 3 DUIs, lots of childhood trauma, which we'll talk about in a few moments, including physical, mental, emotional, and sexual child abuse. Author of multiple books. The most recent is Wake Up, You're Not Broken. And her website is wakeupwithmarci.com. That's wakeupwithmarci.com, MARCI.com. Marci, I want to go back, before we go into your story about the abuse, I want to talk about the DUIs. You said earlier in the conversation there were 2 when you're young and 1 you're older. Was there a big difference in the I'm going to say there's 2 different ones. 2 when you're younger, 1 when you're older. Was there a big difference between the 2?
Oh, 100%. Just because of where I was in my life. There was when I was young, it affected more of my parents and my grandparents. And when I was older, it affected my family, my husband, my children, and where I was in my life. So it was very different.
How old were you when you had the second one? Or the third one, I'm sorry.
Well, the third one, I was 45.
All right. There's a big difference. When you're 19 and 20, it's like, okay, it's a hassle. It's something, I'm sure that, but
yeah.
the thing is, it's when someone is arrested in their 40s, they're married, they got kids, I can only imagine the impact on the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very different. When I ended up getting arrested for that DUI, it's so much shame and so much guilt. And I thought that I was going to lose everything in my life. And I really hit a big rock bottom at that time.
I could understand that. You said, and I don't want to be dramatic about this. One of the things I can only imagine is you having to call your husband or your spouse at the time saying, by the way, I'm arrested for DUI, and them going off the deep end.
Yeah, so what happened was I was arrested, and I actually thought I'd be able to call a friend and be able to get out of it and somehow keep this from my husband, because
how did that work out for you?
I was so afraid. I'm sorry?
How did that work out for you?
Well, the police in our small community called my husband, so he ended up showing up along with my friend. And you know, I had a lot of anger at that time, a lot of resentment, and I was the victim. I was the victim for the majority of my life because of what I had gone through. And even with my husband, I was the victim because he worked all the time. I took care of the kids alone. I was trying to balance a career and the kids and the family. And so when I got that DUI, I felt like the victim when I went to bed. But when I woke up that next day, that's when everything shifted for me. And I knew I had a problem. I knew I had to make a change. And I didn't, everything that I had built in my life, I knew I did not want to lose. And my family was number one to me. And I recognized that in that morning.
Well, one of the things I've got to say, and this, you can respond to it or not. If you don't, I understand. It is a short trip from victim to perpetrator. And we can't do both successfully at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm just going to say this. When you go through abuse and you go through trauma, you fall into the victim role.
Right.
And there are a lot of bad choices that you make through that mindset. And getting sober is one of the hardest things, but you have to make a decision to do it.
Right. It's a daily thing.
Make the change in your life.
I agree.
And for me, God stepped in, and I knew it was time, or I was going to fall off the deep end.
One of the things that, and I'm not here to tell my story, but I'm just saying this. I went through a lot of trauma, not child abuse, not sexual abuse, not any of that stuff. But there came a point where I began to realize, it took quite a while, that, and I'm using an analogy here, that I had an arterial bleed, but I was so focusing on that who caused the bleed, I didn't focus on that I was bleeding on everybody else was important to me, and I was chasing them away with my behavior. And that was the problem, was not what caused it, it's my behavior. I had to take accountability and responsibility for what I was doing.
And that's something you learn through recovery, through the healing journey. You learn to look at yourself, and then you recognize that your behavior is the only thing that you can change. And so through this healing journey that I've been on for almost 11 years, I have made huge revelations and huge changes, and it has allowed me to build a very different life.
I've got to ask you this in a form of question, and someone said this earlier, and I'm not quite there yet. They said that a lot of healing involves forgiveness, and I've accepted that a lot of things happen. I've forgiven most of the people that were involved, but I'm not all the way there yet. Are you all the way there yet with forgiveness when it comes to the people that abuse you, or is that not important to you?
Oh, no, I think forgiveness is one of the huge steps in healing. We have to forgive, and I'm not saying it's easy. And this is something that I talk a lot about today, especially when I'm speaking to others. But forgiveness is not about saying what somebody else did was okay.
Right.
It's about releasing the power that person or that story has over you. And I have been able to forgive my mother for keeping me in a home that wasn't safe and making the decisions that she made. I'm still a work in progress as far as the man that sexually abused me. There are things that happened to me that I used to stay stuck in that story and feel sorry for myself. And now I realize those things happen to me. They don't define me. So with that, I have forgiven. But it's hard for me to wrap my head around harming a young person, a child, anybody. So
I can't do that. I can't imagine that because it's so foreign of a concept. My mind doesn't even think like that.
Yeah, but I also recognize, being a mental health advocate, that having the disease of the mind is a disease, even though we may not necessarily understand it.
I agree with you at that point, and I'm going to break coming really quick. Here's what I always say. Whether someone's mentally ill or not, if they punch you in the nose, there's no difference to the victim. And that is what drove them. And I think as a society, we've gotten too involved in motives and manifestos and not in paying attention to people's actions. Because I've been through really bad stuff, does not give me the right to swing on people. It does not give me the right to put my hands on people. We're talking with Marci Hopkins. She had 3 DUI arrests, lots of childhood trauma, which we'll talk about in a few moments. She's the author of multiple books. The most recent is Wake Up, You're Not Broken. And her website is wakeupwithmarci.com. That's wakeupwithmarci.com, spelled MARCI.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to take a short break. I promise you, we'll be right back.
How would you like a free ebook on tips to improve your health? We're talking about tips you can use for free to add years to your life. Best of all, the ebook is free to download at lethealthy.com. When we say free, we mean free. So you can download the free ebook to improve your physical health, all while preserving your financial health. Get the ebook for free today at lethealthy.com. That's at lethealthy.com. Again, the website is lethealthy.com.
Return conversation with Marci Hopkins on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And she had 3 DUI arrests, lots of childhood trauma, which we're going to talk about in this segment. She's the author of multiple books. The most recent is Wake Up, You're Not Broken. I love that title. And her website is wakeupwithmarci.com. That's wakeupwithmarci.com, MARCI.com. Marci, I got to talk about the child abuse. And I don't want to go into lots of detail because it is such a foreign concept for most people. And I believe most people out there really are good. They don't think of things like this. I don't think of things like this. But as a retired policeman, old retired policeman, those are the ones that bother me the most. Those are the ones that raise their ugly head. That, domestic violence, and assaults on elderly, especially the ones I couldn't close. So you said earlier in the conversation when you were a teenager, you could not wait to get out of the house. How bad was it?
Well, those teenage years, the sexual abuse started by my stepfather at 12 years old. So I'm just entering my teen years. And I thought he was an amazing man, but I realize now he was grooming me. And he groomed me for about 6 months, and then that's when things started going south. I did ultimately tell my mother what was happening. What I really remember about that conversation is she told me to wear more clothes when I was sleeping because I knew things were happening to me in my sleep. But I couldn't prove it at that time. I just knew, I had a feeling there were things that did happen while I was awake. So she kept me in the home. She said, just wear more clothes. And at that time, I'm looking at 7th, 8th grade. I start failing out of school. I am experimenting with alcohol. I'm becoming somewhat promiscuous. I made a suicide pact with my girlfriend. I saw no way out. I am so thankful that I did not end my life, and I was able to get past that and have that fear of actually ending my life. And I thought something could possibly change. The second time I told my mother, there was proof something was happening to me in my sleep. When I told my mother the next day, because she could tell that I was in a very bad place, she called a hotline. She tried to get help. Then ultimately, when she confronted my stepfather, he said, I wanted it. You can only imagine the distress that I was in at that time. She then decided to stay with him.
But how can a 12-year-old want something sexual? Number one, in most states in the United States, I don't know about Texas, but the age of consent is 16. Everybody knows that. And when I was 12, and granted it's a long time ago, my mind didn't even go there. It was more wrapped up in cars and drag racing and fishing and all that other stuff. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. It was a really, really hard time because, I'm just a young girl with a bunch of dreams, right? And then that was all shattered. And then it became about survival for me. And that's really where the perfectionism stepped in for me, because the only thing I did have control of was how I looked on the outside. Every piece of clothing I had to have was perfect. And so there were different things that I could find in my life that I could have control over and have that to be perfect because of the utter chaos I was living in. But after a little bit of time, we ended up moving again. And like I say in my book, my first book, Chaos to Clarity, we moved to a bigger home on a beautiful street, but the nightmare was the same. And I don't remember a lot of that time, to be honest. I think that I've shut it out. I want to think that nothing was happening, but I don't really know. My mother finally ended up divorcing him. That was about 9th grade when we made that move. She finally ended up divorcing him because things got so bad between the two of them. There was a lot of physical abuse and alcoholism, drinking going on. I tried to stay out of the house as much as I could. But my mother finally divorced. I asked her to please stay where we were in Houston in Texas. And so we stayed for that final year of my high school years. But during that time, her drinking was so out of control, and I had stepped into the role of being the mother. Mm-hmm. And I just knew when I graduated high school that I had to get out of that home. And that's what I said in the beginning, is just I couldn't wait. I was biding my time. And I did try to do the normal thing, like go to college and the things that we are programmed to believe that we are supposed to do, high school, college, get married, have babies, that sort of thing. But I had no direction when I got out of high school, and I fell into the drug scene and the party scene, and that's where those two DUIs happened for me.
Got to ask you a quick question, and this is a little bit of derailment. The term partying is used quite a bit in society for drug use and alcohol consumption, and I don't see the party in either two.
Yeah. Well, you think you're having fun, but you're not.
No, that's the only bad stuff happened. What's the old saying? Bad stuff happened when I was drinking. It never happened when I was not drinking, ever.
Exactly. And my life was utter chaos at that time.
But you don't sound like that person now. That's the thing. It's like you did. We'll get into how you got from point A to point B in a moment. But I want to elaborate more on point A. How do you go from being an out of control? I'm air quoting, out of control teenager making all the wrong choices. The DUIs, I'm sure they helped, but they didn't get you all the way there because it continued on until you said you were in your 40s. Then how does someone change?
Well, thankfully, my grandmother stepped in because she saw that I was getting out of control. I was trying to go to college, but I wasn't going to my classes. I had good intention to do what I needed to do to progress in life, but I always fell back into my old behaviors. Old behaviors being drinking, being in the wrong crowd, finding those that were doing the drugs or drinking and not prioritizing what I needed to prioritize.
Right.
But I felt very lost at that time. I didn't know because I had no direction. I really didn't. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no passions. I just was literally existing to survive. And my grandmother stepped in, and it was around that time I was getting those DUIs and basically wasn't going to classes, and I was just floundering. And she took me in for some testing to see where my passions lie and what I was good at. And with that testing, I started having direction. And I'm a very creative person. It came up what type of schools would be best for me. And I ultimately went to the Art Institute of Houston. Now, granted, during that time, I couldn't drive. I mean, I had gotten my DUI, so my license had been taken away. And when I did get my car back, I had a detector, an alcohol detector in there, breathalyzer. And so I had to really make some changes in my life. I was riding my bike to school. I was riding my bike to work. So I was facing the consequences.
And how old were you when this occurred, when you went back to school?
I was 20 at that time.
Big change. We're talking with Marci Hopkins. She had 3 DUI arrests, lots of childhood trauma, which we'll talk about. We'll talk about her transition, her journey to get to where she's at today. She's written multiple books. The most recent is Wake Up, You're Not Broken, and her website is wakeupwithmarci.com. That's wakeupwithmarci.com, spelled MARCI.com.
Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page.
This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. I promise you. We'll be right back.
Be sure to follow me on the Clubhouse app. It's like having your own talk radio station on your phone. And best of all, it is free. Be sure to follow me, John J. Wiley, at LET Radio Show, and look for major announcements. That's right. The Clubhouse app is free. And be sure to follow me, John J. Wiley, or at LET Radio Show for major announcements. That's John J. Wiley or at LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse app. Did I mention that it is free?
We're in a conversation with Marci Hopkins on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. She had 3 DUI arrests and lots of childhood trauma, which you talked about. She's the author of multiple books. Most recent is Wake Up, You're Not Broken, and her website is wakeupwithmarci.com. That's wakeupwithmarci.com, spelled MARCI.com. Got to ask you this. When I talk to you, Marci, you sound like you're pretty well put together. And a lot of people, first of all, how many children do you have?
I have 2.
Do they ever think my mom was out of control, or think you got it all going on all the time?
Listen, they were younger when I stopped drinking. They did not see me getting drunk too often. I just always had a glass of wine in my hand.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't until the end of my drinking that I was starting to show signs of getting out of control, and like a couple of blackouts. I just was managing my drinking. Everything was around drinking, but I was, air quotes, managing it.
It was such an effort. It was so much work for me, to be honest.
It's so much work.
There's so much energy I can put into other things that I'm actually pretty good at, because that I was lousy at. By the way, what I was getting at was, it almost seems like you're 2 different people. The Marci Hopkins I'm talking to today, and the Marci Hopkins that went through all this bad stuff. Do you ever look back and go, that was like another person or a lifetime ago?
Oh, definitely another person, lifetime ago, and I'm so grateful for life today.
I think that's a great way of putting it. I realize that a lot of what I went through is the reason why I am today, the way I am. Doesn't mean I would not do things differently. I would do things differently for sure. But I don't have animosity towards my past. Can you say that about you?
I absolutely can. I used to, like I said, feel very sorry for myself. But I recognize today that I had to go through what I went through to be able to do the work that I do today. And I turned that pain into purpose. And I don't think I could help people the way that I do today if I hadn't gone through what I did.
I agree with you 100%. And that's a big reason why I do this radio show and podcast. See, you got into the media. By the way, let me tell you something about working in the media. Radio, television, doesn't matter what it is. You get arrested for DUI, it hits the front page. You do not want to do that. And they oftentimes don't take a chance on people that have, and I'm air quoting, checkered past. So did you at the time think that you got lucky?
Well, honestly, those 2 DUIs that happened when I was very young, those were like expunged after a while, right? Like nobody knew about that side of me. And when I got the DUI when I was 45, at that time I was acting, I was in front of the camera. But what's interesting is that life took me towards drinking more.
Yeah.
Because the roller coaster of it, the insecurities that I had, feeling judged all of the time, like I was already feeling broken. And then I just felt that the alcohol was going to give me some sort of courage, as we do a lot of times, right? We think that that's liquid courage, that, it changes our inhibitions. And what ultimately happened, it took me down that slippery slope, and something that I thought I was managing, and it just took me to that rock bottom. And I was very fortunate that once that happened, that I made the change almost immediately. And I was the one who created the platform myself, and it was recognized that it was needed, because it was when we started talking more about alcohol use disorder, transformational stories, mental health. So the timing of my show was the time that we needed to hear these conversations, and people weren't being judged as much as they were in the past.
And I think that a big part of it is a self-judgment. Then, and by the way,
yes.
I'm a performer. Working in radio for a long time, I've been on stage to introduce Joan Jett and Blackhearts, Leonard Skinner, ZZ Top, you name it. And all the time, I knew I had a job to do. I just recently attended the Candlelight Vigil for Police Week in D.C. I was one of the readers, put on by the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Fund. That was 35,000 people in front of me.
Wow.
But see, I know I had a role to do. The thing is, as a performer, I'm not the same guy personally that I am as a performer. And sometimes that can create a contradiction in that I could see reaching out for alcohol, even though I've been sober the entire time I've done this.
Mm-hmm. Incredible. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was giving me courage when really it was just breaking me down more. And that's what I was going to say is just there's so much shame, and you just start isolating and breaking down, and you're just not the same person. And it's once you start to make that decision that you've got to make this change. And I believe, like for me, I needed that consequence to be able to really make the change, because I had tried to get sober a year before, and it didn't work for me because, again, I was comparing myself and my story to those in the rooms.
Which is easy to do. Which is really easy to do because I'm not as bad as that guy. And I didn't do this. And we could beat that horse for a long time. One thing that you mentioned earlier in your conversation was shame, and I could relate right away because there came a point where I was deeply ashamed of me, not of what I'd done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hated myself. I did feel like I was just a shell of a person, and I had so much shame about what I had done, so much guilt, and so much fear of what was to come. And I had no idea how to live life without alcohol. It was all I'd ever known. It was all I'd been surrounded by. So when I started this journey, you talked about that forgiveness part. That's something that I had to find for myself before I could move on. And it's not easy to do, but the more that you start doing the things that you need to do, and that's what I talk about in my book, Wake Up, You're Not Broken, facing those emotions that you've been pushing down for so long and learning new modalities to cope with life, everything changes, and the way that you feel about yourself. And once you start building that confidence, that self-worth, that's when things really start to shift in life.
How would you describe how you are today compared to where you were?
Whole.
Okay, that's a good word. I think of myself as being level, pretty level and all the time. I don't have the highs like I used to. I don't have the lows like I used to. Your website is wakeupwithmarci.com. That's spelled MARCI.com. You were in the media. You're still in the media. Are your books there?
Yes, my books are on the website. Absolutely.
And what are you doing today?
So today, thank you so much for bringing up my book, Wake Up, You're Not Broken, and just released the book.
I love the title of that name, by the way, because some people are like, I'm dinged up. Don't get me wrong. I'm scathed.
Yeah.
I'm definitely scathed, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it's just recognizing, I have things wrong with me, but let's rebuild, right? And recognizing that if you start taking these steps and start this healing and changing your mindset and rewiring your mind, you are going to find a worth and your worth and being whole. And it's a beginning. It's a beginning to a new life. And this book is a companion for those first 30 days of sobriety. And I wrote this book because it was something that I wish that I had.
I wish. Yeah. I got to cut you off really quickly. WakeUpWithMarci.com is a website. That's WakeUpWithMarci, MARCI.com. Do I understand correct? Do you have a podcast that goes along with that?
I do. It was a TV show. It's now a podcast. It's also streaming on LA Tribune and on NJ. And I am going to toot my horn for a second. I just won a Telly Award in mental health for my podcast. So very grateful for that. And listen, life was changing for me. I was moving around. And so I pivoted and launched the the podcast because I was moving and I wanted to continue to tell these stories of triumph and help others in the area of mental health, women's health, and recovery.
And what they don't tell you, Marci, which I'm sure you know, it's a lot of work. The whole process to get from point A to point B and being a successful podcaster and author, I'm sure, is a lot of work. That's wakeupwithmarci.com, spelled MARCI.com. Marci Hopkins, thanks so much for being a guest on Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and telling your story. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.